Welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast with your hosts, Jody Roscoe and Heather Fisher. We're talking about all things downsizing, from our own experiences with clients to guest experts. Let's make downsizing easier, one conversation at a time.
Hi, welcome to Downsizing Roadmap. We've got a really interesting topic today.
Yeah, this one's a little different.
Yeah, so we are talking today about why we don't talk about aging in America.
Yeah.
So we're in Ohio. Most of our listeners are here in America, and I think there's just a different view on aging in our country and what that looks like and the conversations we put around that.
Mm-hmm.
So
and the ones we don't have, and how is that hurting us possibly, not having the conversations?
Yeah. I'm Heather Fisher.
I'm Jody Roscoe.
And we're excited to have you here today, and we're just going to dive into this topic and talk about some facts and some ways to maybe start that conversation and some ways it's different in other parts of the world and ways maybe we should make it a little different in our own stories.
Yeah, I think we start with kind of like a history about how we got here, right? Because every culture gets where they are from their past. So we kind of have to take a look at what that looked like. And ours obviously is independence, right? So Independence Day, we celebrate independence. That is such a strong, for us, a strong trait in our society. And, the people that came here, the original people that came here,
founding fathers
came for independence, right? They wanted to have independence. And so that string is still pulling at us, even now in our society. And so, so we had, industrialization of the suburbs, we kind of had our cultural shift from families were being together. We started with being independent, in 1776 as a country. But then as we kind of came through that, we had some other things happen. So industrialization happened, which then took us from, everybody grows up on the farm, they all work together, everybody's there doing their thing, to, now we're in cities, we're in nuclear families, we're, more separated. So we are all very independent in that way, right? It's still independence. It's just independence in a different way. And so we don't have that, grandmas we're the Waltons, right?
Yes.
We don't have the Waltons anymore, if you're old enough to remember the Waltons.
I am.
Everybody's on the farm doing their thing. You have the kids, you have the grandparents, you have a whole, group, whole different, generations all living together.
Yeah, multi-generational living in one household.
So we don't really see that here now because everybody moved into their own homes, and nuclear families and suburban homes kind of separated everybody, and people went to different states. That was a normal thing. You could move away and do your thing. So that's part of it. And then, like we said, individualism as a core value, meaning you're a self-made person, right? Everybody needs to rely on themselves. I mean, all the things that you heard when you were little, right? You got to rely on yourself. You got to take care of yourself. And some of those are great lessons. Be responsible for yourself and all of that. But some of that causes you to be on a little bit of an island.
Yeah, when that trait is running so strongly through, ourselves as something we've been taught from a young age, and also, through the values of the country of being that self-made person and
independent.
All of that when that becomes a little harder, it's not looked at as a stage to celebrate that you are in the place of honor of being at an older age. But I think society here in America can look at all of those changes that come along with it as failing to meet that ideal character traits that we have, instead of celebrating the life well lived and honoring all that got somebody to that stage.
Well, and I think sometimes that comes across in parents older. This definitely was the case with my mom, was that she didn't want to admit that she needed help. That was a failure to not be able to do the things that she used to be able to do, and she really struggled with allowing me to try to help with that, because number one, I'm the kid and she's the parent, and also like it definitely felt like a failure to her to not be able to do things as she grew older, instead of like, hey, I've done those things. Now, I helped you when you were little, you helped me when I'm, all of that kind of, it just was a different dynamic.
Yeah, I think our culture celebrates, it's a fast-paced, fast-moving culture that celebrates growth and productivity and youthfulness, and we don't take longer family time and siestas and longer meal times and
long family vacations.
Yeah, time off. And so when those stages in life mimic those things that we're not used to, it feels different and, not just something that continues. It feels like a big shift and a change instead of the go, go, go.
Yeah. And so it's hard to, put that all together because then we do come to a place where, we need help when we get a little bit older, or even in our middle years when we have kids and we're running and working and doing, like we need some help. And we just we have been structured to be so independent, that we struggle asking for help, I think, in this country. I think that's a struggle.
Yeah, when we were doing some research for this episode, just looking at our housing here as well is a big factor. And being in real estate, we see this, but, our country is young in comparison to a lot of, places in the world. And a lot of our big times when suburbia was being built, the homes were built for that nuclear family, 2 adults and however many kids, especially here in the Midwest where we are, there's a lot of 2-story homes built for that family living, and our society wasn't built with a lot of multi-generational options, or just options for someone to age in place. I pulled a stat, a couple stats. The AARP had a poll that 76% of adults 50 and over, their future plan is, their ideal would be to age in place. But then the census data from 2020, they pulled data that said only 10% of U.S. homes are built to be aging ready. Meaning, 0 steps or
one floor, easy.
1 floor, an accessible full bathroom. In whatever way that looks, only 10% of our housing is built for what people would want, that aging in place. And we have, at least that I'm familiar with, we have very few options of homes that support, multi-generations living for a long time in one space, and that flow through that you might see other places.
Well, when people, they left the farms, right? And then they went into the city. And so then in the city, they had like apartments and kind of smaller places, whatever. Then when we left the cities and we went into the suburbs, we ended up with these little houses. Like, think when everybody came back from World War II, like in the 40s and 50s, like they're the little tiny, houses that we have here, at least, that are, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, maybe 1,000, 1,200 square feet. That isn't a family generational house. And our houses have gotten bigger as we have gotten along in the 80s, and all of the, spending and whatnot that has happened. The houses have gotten bigger, but the thought process of being multi-generational in those houses has not really come to fruition for us.
Yeah, and I think the mindset, like you said, through the 80s and all of that we feel a need that we have to have that large home and that there wouldn't possibly be room. A lot of those apartments and townhomes and things in cities back, in the day were multi-generational,
right.
Just a lot less square footage,
right.
And that's how people lived. And we have an expectation of so much more need in our space, and wrapping around downsizing into that doesn't feel like something we can do.
And one other thing in history, when people immigrated here for the American dream and they came, they left their families.
Yeah.
Right? So back to not, now you're that nuclear family again, and they left a lot of their heritage and their extended families in the countries that they came from. So, so interesting how the independence thought process in America has shaped then what aging looks like here, I think.
Yeah.
So for kids, how it shaped kids, or how that thought process shapes kids, is, they feel kind of conflicted. So they were raised to respect independence, and I know I was, and I know like in the 80s we kind of ran wild. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
Yes.
I know you did too.
Don't listen, Mom.
But that was how the parents were, right? Remember, it was kind of like, go out and play and don't come back until it's dark.
The street lights come on.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
your
it wasn't
curfew.
like we were doing it without our parents' knowledge. Like that was just kind of how we were raised.
Yeah.
And so they expected us to be independent and take care of ourselves and, do all of that. And so since we respected independence because that's how we were raised, then it's hard for us to go to our parents and be like, hey, I see, you might be having a little bit of trouble with independence. Like, we don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, it feels like a dynamic
Disrespect.
of like disrespectful, and like we don't know how we would parent our parents because we were parented to be independent.
Right.
And so
How do we parent from now? It's not going to be independent. Like
Yeah.
what? And we don't really want to parent our parents, and our parents don't want us to parent them. It's a whole thing, honestly. It's a struggle a little bit. So, logically or logistically, kids can live far away. They can, they don't have the finances sometimes to help. They aren't able to come back and be around on a day-to-day basis if they're in a different state, or, sometimes kids don't even realize their parents aren't doing okay because they're not there enough to see the day-to-day, and your parents can kind of fool you sometimes if you're only there for a little while.
I think, back to that we just talked about why we're like this as a society, but for a lot of us, finances and health are two topics that were not discussed freely as we were growing up between the parents and the kids' generation, maybe not even amongst themselves in a partnership as well, just very private topics, and they're so intermingled in this topic of downsizing and later in life decisions, because they are based on your health situation and your financial situation as to what you're going to do next. So it's all interwoven on why these conversations, we tend to avoid them because they're not conversations we've had all along.
Right.
It feels like a big the talk.
Right. And the role reversal thing feels super weird. Yeah, it definitely feels like the talk and not one anybody wants to have. And then they don't know what the boundaries are. Kids don't know what that boundary feels like and what they should be, when it's okay to talk and when it isn't.
Yeah.
So I think, that's something that we could work on. And I think in our 5-step process, that part where in the beginning, if you're the one who's thinking about downsizing and you get kind of dreamy about what you want it to look like, and it really helps you to be able to put into words what that looks like, so that then you can talk to your family about what it is you're looking for and what you want and all of those things, and you just get it more in your head exactly what it is. Sometimes it helps to talk through it with your family to figure out what it is, but sometimes you can sit down independently. It's independence, guys. And figure out, what you think you would want, and then maybe have a conversation about what else that could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, just being silent on all of it isn't kindness or respectfulness. It's just postponing things that need to be talked about. And when it's just in little bites, like, hey, I'm starting to think about this, and then it doesn't need to be a big conversation at that moment. And then you're layering on those pieces as you think about, I was thinking about this and I saw this. What do you think about that? Those type of little layers. It doesn't have to be this one conversation that has to solve all decisions at once. If you can shift your mindset to getting used to talking about it more, for a longer period of time and earlier.
And I think sometimes it's the kids who needs to shift their mindset, and sometimes it's the parents who needs to shift their mindset. You know, sometimes if they're like, hey, I want to, you know, age in place here forever, but it's not a house that they can do that in, you know, there's some thought process that needs to get used to, like, hey, this might not be, you know, the best plan, or is there a way I can make this house a place that I could stay? You know, there's all kinds of questions and answers, just starting to talk about them. Yeah. So we talk about what it meant for the kids. How does that relate if you're the parent? How does that relate, right? So it feels like we kind of get you lose your role as an identity as, you know, first you have your kids and like you're the parent and all of that. Then the kids are gone and you probably have some kind of life, but as it kind of gets smaller, what is your role there? Like, are you grandparents? Are you storytelling? Are you cooking? Are you being there? Or are you in your own little nuclear place and not being part of it? You know, what does that actually look like, and what should your role look like, and should you be there more, and should you not? Like, it's, there's
even
always
beyond
this
that,
like boundaries
should,
again. Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, back to that should word, feeling sometimes negative, but what do you want that to look like? And being back to that dream it, do you want to be closer for more of that? Do you like having a little bit more time on your own for your hobbies and your clubs and the things you're involved in? Just figuring out that identity, and then does your house and your schedule and your full picture support that life that you want it to be? And if not, what changes can get to that?
And if it is, you want to be more in your life of your grandkids and like whatever, how are your kids feeling about that? And how can you integrate that without feeling, you know, uncomfortable with what that could look like? So, and the only way you can do that is through conversations, you know, just conversations about what works and what doesn't and what feels good. So
I think this is a thought that people have, and you know, I'm not at, you know, retirement age, but I have adult kids, and this resonated with me. But I think a lot of people, the parents, think if I don't say anything, my kids won't worry. Mm-hmm. And also being on the bottom side of that, as the kid, that silence isn't comforting. You do wonder and care, you know, how are my parents doing? What can I help with? And the more you can just have that open dialogue, I don't think people should hold on to that. Well, if I just say I'm fine, they won't worry, because both ways you're worrying.
Yeah, because I
silence.
think that's that fear of burdening your kids, or fear of not looking independent like we were talking about before. Or I think that as we grew up, like you said before, there were a lot of stuff that wasn't talked about, finances, you know, health, all of those kind of things. And so, so now from a parent's point of view, they don't want to tell their kids because they don't want to burden their kids with their problems. So they're like, I'm fine, even if they're not fine, and they know they're not fine. And they know they might need some help. They don't want to, you know, feel like they are putting that on their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's hard to not look at your adult kids sometimes still as being like 10 years old too.
Right.
And trusting that they might have easy answer, like something you're unsure of, or not sure how to do or what to do.
Or assuming that they're too busy or not willing to help, because they might be busy, but that doesn't mean, you know, that they're not willing to help if they know what the path could look like and how they can fit it in and what would actually be helpful and kind of those things. I think, but I think what happens when we don't do that and we go from that fear of being a burden and those kind of things is that you just a lot of times that means that you kind of push that can down the road, kick that can down the road, don't address things that you know are a problem that are happening. And then what happens is it comes to a time when there's a crisis. And honestly, the crisis does burden the kids in a way, because now there isn't like an easy step through and let's get through this and let's take some time and figure it out. Now it's like, oh my gosh, you know, this is what's happening and I need you to be here and handle it no matter what's happening in your life. And I'm not saying that if you're having a crisis, your kids shouldn't be there and part of it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying some of that can be
alleviated.
Yeah, or even totally not happen if you have conversations earlier.
Yeah. So, what if we talk about what we've lost as a society by moving away from that multi-generational living that's created some of these stressors, in other places where that's happening and multi-generations are in the same house, there's all of that daily conversation and the daily visibility of seeing changes and seeing what might need more assistance. It's just easier to have quick conversations as you're going through your day, so it doesn't end up being that giant talk. Something that is definitely lost is the wisdom that can be shared, the family stories, recipes, teaching of things that are small things in and of themselves but build your whole family legacy, those special recipes that get passed down generation to generation. When we're not sharing that kitchen space on a daily basis, there's so much of that gets lost, and it's an unfortunate side effect. And then just the normalcy of dependency. If it's culturally your norm that the older generation is living with the younger generations, and that burden shifts from they took care of the kids till now the adult kids are doing more around the house, it's just a dynamic of dependency that works through that whole time span. Whereas when you're not in that same living space, you do have to ask for help and ask for your adult kids to take care of their household and yours, and it just feels different. I know, years ago, in real estate, this was a long time ago, and my kids were still little at home, and a property came up for sale in our area that I showed my mom. It was an interesting property, and she got an idea in her head, and was talking to other family members. She just wanted a family compound, and this property would have been it. And, it just didn't make sense for all of the logistical moves that everyone would have to make, and more people moving to our area than not. But she, I think in her head, went pretty far down that, wouldn't that be wonderful? And I mean, I can still picture the property and just think like, I wish part of me wishes like we would have done that, and just everybody so close to be sharing those responsibilities.
Yeah, I think we definitely have lost something in that. I think we had some times when our family would vacation together, and so being with some people, even just for a week, all the time, you sit and stories happen, and somebody's grandma's making food, and we're watching her, and what are you doing there, and just stuff that just doesn't happen. Even if you live close to each other in the same town, it just isn't the same as getting up and having coffee, and what do you talk about when you're doing that, and it's just not the same. Even on family vacations or times that you spend, it's just different.
I think it's such a big loss. I was thinking about this, but here in America, it's so common that we have kids that need to go to daycare of some sort because the parents are both working. And so that's more of an institution setting. So there's pros and cons, and, not speaking negatively about it. My kids, did that, and it just is the way our culture is. But it is more of an institution setting than if they were at home. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have more seniors that need to go to some form of nursing care that they might not have gone so soon if they were in that same household, and that is more institutional than aging at home. And it's such a dynamic that I think if we had a trend more towards that multi-generational, the grandparents could help with that child care, the adult kids could help with that senior, extra needs that are needed, and it just would feel a lot different. And I think we're missing out as a society on some huge benefits there.
Yeah, I think the stories would be passed on in a different way. I think that that the adult, the parents would feel needed, with the kids, and the kids would feel like there are more people in their lives that are there that they can rely on. I mean, there are a lot of pieces there that we get some of it, but not living together, you don't get it all the same.
Yeah, different relationships with grandparents that are more like a visiting versus just that super close. And yeah, it's something. When we were looking at floor plans to build our house, I was looking on lots of builder websites, and it was interesting to me. There was a lot of options to build multi-generational homes. I mean, we've talked about that on an episode before, that option where maybe it's still somewhat two separate living spaces in varying degrees on how connected that is, but they're on the same property. And interesting to watch and see if that's a trend that we're circling towards as people are buying and building new properties.
Yeah, well, and I think other cultures do it already. And so I think other cultures that have come to our, country want some of those homes already because that's already how they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so in Japan, elders are honored guides. So they have, respect for the aged day. It's a national holiday where they honor people who have so much wisdom and all of that. They really feel like the elders are wisdom keepers. And honestly, it's true. They have had so much experience in life, and it's interesting to sit and talk and hear them talk about what that looks like and learn from that. So they feel like that's, naturalized, something that they can celebrate and something that that is not shameful. It's good.
Yeah, very celebrated. In China, caregiving is seen as kind of that repayment for all the parenting and the life-giving, of the early years. And so it's expected, and there's clear expectations of, supporting the older members of your family.
Yeah, I'm getting close to the end of that time when, I'm taking care of my kids like fully, right? And so even as adults, I know they're always going to be, they're always there. But, in my house, like doing things like laundry and dishes and food and all of that stuff, right? And so part of me is like, yeah, like when's my turn? Like I spent all these years like doing this.
Tally marks of all the days.
And I don't honestly like tit for tat. I don't mean it like that. But I do think that's, I think that is an interesting concept. It's like we took the care and now like you'll take the care,
Yeah, we're always teasing when our older kids are doing something great and towards their success. I'm like, great, because you'll be able to take care of me even better. Teasing them, but
for us it still feels like weird because that is still for us like we're not being independent. Like I still feel that way because I was raised so strongly in that. So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, we're still clarifying it with just kidding,
Right.
It's like, wait.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in Latin America, multi-generational households are very common, and grandparents often help raise the children, and then children in turn support them as they age. So that's what we were just talking about. It's just a cycle that works very cohesively, all in that same household.
Yeah, and same in the Mediterranean, Italy, Greece, the daily meals, their family gatherings, they can include the grandparents, their traditions are tied up in the memories and all of that with their grandparents. And so it's tied to like cultural pride and storytelling and, all of that. And so none of these countries have to have like the talk, right? It just happens, right? It just, they're expected to be there and be part of it. And, they don't experience isolation a lot because they're just expected to be part of that.
Yeah, very much more honor given to that phase in life than I feel like we give it here in America.
Yeah, I think, many other countries definitely have this, so.
Yeah, in some Native American cultures and African cultures, the elders are the ones that hold all of the oral stories
right.
and the traditions. And so they lead ceremonies and councils and all of that, because they've earned that by all of that wisdom and storytelling
And
that they know
experience.
from generation after generation, until the younger generations have heard it so much that they become, that
Yeah.
next step to do it. And it's just, traditions that are so missing sometimes.
Well, and I mean, I see that in my experience. I know I've talked about my grandma's crystal and all of the things, but like those stories are gone. Like I don't know because we didn't write it down or say it enough times to know whose was what, and all of those stories, are gone because they're gone.
I think that what we're seeing in some of this research we did too is that all of the theme running through it is the elders are honored because of the stories and the wisdom they hold, and nowhere in there is the stuff
Right.
that they own.
Correct. Yeah, no, it is definitely about wisdom and bonds and being, there as a bond as people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny because one of the stats that we found, so the blue zone, what we're talking about, the blue zone where
Yeah.
people live to be, old, over 100. They live 5 times the U.S. rate of longevity, which is crazy. And it's tied to purpose and intergenerational bonds. So I think when we're talking about, the grandparents taking care of the kids, that's purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And so, or being an integral part of the family is purpose, or being, somebody that is honored by holding the stories and what that is purpose.
Yeah.
And so that is something scary that we're missing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That saddens me a little bit
Yeah.
to be missing these things.
Yeah. And I didn't really think about it in this framework, honestly, until we kind of were doing that and why we're like that and
Yeah.
where the threads come from. And I understand it. I mean, we have Independence Day we celebrate every year, right? It's
Yeah.
all very, very independent. But sometimes maybe independence isn't good. Sometimes it is, right? It's helped us grow into an amazing country that I love. So don't get me wrong about that. But sometimes we might need to reflect and look about how that's in our relationships, how that is actually working.
Yeah, and what pieces we can maybe make small shifts in our own families to change that, and that will start with conversations.
Right.
And the conversations that we have, which can look, here's a great framework for starting that conversation, but start with curiosity. If you're asking your parents, or curiosity always, we talk about this, as real estate agents, but that curiosity is always the right starting point. So maybe questions like, what does independence look like for you in the next 10 years? Or pull it back to a smaller time frame. What does it look like for the next few years? What are you hoping for, instead of just waiting for what life brings your way?
Come from curiosity. I think this is something we talk about all the time
Yeah.
in our real estate, with our team, with people. Like, we are always curious about what's going on. What do you want your life to look like? And, how can we help you get there? And this is the same. It's, how mom and dad, like, what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
All of that.
And how
Come
can
from
we
curiosity.
help you?
Yeah.
And how can we help you get there? Normalize the conversation, recognize, I know we don't talk about this much, but just want to plan ahead a little bit and find out, what's going on for you. Acknowledge that they are independent, and that you're not trying to say that they don't have their independence or freedom to make choices, but what would support look like to you? How can I help? Back to that question.
I think that's like, sometimes that approach gets messed up a little bit, because I think sometimes adult kids will see their parents starting to fail a little bit, and then they'll feel like they have to solve the problem, and not come from curiosity, and not come from, acknowledging their independence and what that might look like. They kind of are like, Mom, you can't live in this house anymore. And, this isn't, because
Yeah.
they're afraid and worried, and they might be coming from the right place, but they come at it like, okay, to problem solve this.
Steamroll a bit.
I'm going to problem solve this.
Yeah.
And so I think conversations will go better. Both same way if the kids are like, you can't sell that house, Mom. That's where I grew up. And Mom's like, I can't stay here anymore. It's all just a conversation about why and answering, those curiosity questions and acknowledging what's happening, what has happened, what might happen in the future, and kind of just having conversations around that stuff. But we find the approach is really important.
Yeah, and both ways. If you're, the adult and your adult kids are giving you the pushback, that curiosity works back that way. Like, I know you love this house, I do too. Are you thinking you would want to live here someday? Ask those questions so things are moving and flowing and you're coming to that strategy. Ask those questions about their feelings or their plans as well.
Yeah.
To how that all works together.
And if you're not sure what the future is going to look like, then just start asking some what if questions, What if you can't drive anymore? What if you can't go up the stairs?
Yeah.
What if you're here by yourself now? Those are hard questions. All of those are hard, scary questions. But not asking them doesn't make it go away.
Yeah. Definitely back to that. That's just kicking the can down the road and postponing it. And then, sharing your feelings, those come with the curiosity questions, but sharing your feelings around it can really make the conversation productive instead of feeling like one person is just making all the decisions and not taking the other person into account. But, just letting the other person know you hear their emotions around it and acknowledge that and want a strategy that fits that as well.
Yeah. And when we don't have these conversations, which we've said earlier, we can get to a place where then we're in a crisis. And so we don't want that. 60% of falls happen at home. So you can reduce that a lot by being in a single family, a single level home, one level where there's not a lot of stairs. And so that can really dramatically reduce that. But if your family home had stairs and that's where you are and you want to age in place, then you have some decisions to make about what that looks like.
Yeah. And if a lot of these talks just naturally lead to where you're going to live. So if they're leading to home decisions, that's what we're here for. We've got agents all over the country that, can help with that strategy. And it's okay if it's, a few years down the road. Once you've had that conversation amongst your family, then it's time to have that conversation with the resources that can help, us as real estate agents or a senior placement company or, anyone that can help with any of those senior services that come up as part of those conversations. Please reach out to us and let us know how we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think, that doesn't mean you're even going to do anything. Sometimes we can't make any decisions without information, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just need to get some information. Maybe we need to have an agent help us look at some patio homes or help us look at some, places that we could go and be like, oh, I could do that, or I don't want to do that, or, whatever, so that we can have a better idea of what those things look like. And I think there's a lot of fear around change also in our country. And so that can just help eliminate that fear, because once you know something or what it's going to be like, then there's nothing to be afraid of. You can say, I like it or I don't like it, but it's not scary because you know it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, my biggest takeaway in thinking about this topic is just making sure that the conversations are ongoing and not just a one size fits all. Let's have a hard conversation. Let's leave, closed off and frustrated. And, just let's take those gentle pieces of the conversation and normalize it a little bit more in our own families so that can spread.
Yeah, because asking for help doesn't mean you're not independent. And, waiting for your parents to talk about it and not, being afraid to do that doesn't make it go away. All of those things just make it worse in the end, honestly. So.
Yeah. And always hardest if there has been an outside force that makes it a crisis. So early and ongoing, and then find your dream and let us help you get there.
So start having some conversations.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might need a little downsizing inspiration. Have questions or ideas for future episodes? Reach out to us on our website, www.downsizingroadmap.com. Until next time, let's keep simplifying and moving forward.